get a report on what we talk about. And and he certainly gives his apologies for not being able to be here. We have an exciting meeting today. We expect to be able to get everyone to, there's not a break written into the agenda because we think that we can get through everything in an hour and a half. But if it feels like we just absolutely need to take a 5 or 10 minute comfort break, we will. But what I'm excited about for this meeting is I have been asking myself, we've almost been underway for 2 years now. What impact have we had? What is different about racial equity in North Carolina's criminal justice system as a result of or contributed to by the efforts of this task force? And I'm thrilled to be able to preview for you that a lot of what you're going to hear at this meeting and a lot of what you all are reporting on demonstrates exactly that. What is being achieved, what is different, progress that has been made, which in no way is to diminish the additional and continuing work that needs to happen. But we have been at this for a while, and I'm excited for this meeting because I think we're going to hear some of the results of the work that we've been doing. In February, we had that strategic planning session, and you're going to hear today about what our efforts have been to begin to work on the priorities that were identified in that session. So I also think it's important for us to think broadly, not only what this task force is doing, but how do we fit in the broader ecosystem of other groups and organizations in North Carolina, whether governmental, non-governmental, that are concerned with issues of racial equity. And I'm one thing and so I've been looking at what else do we impact? What else do we have overlap with? Where else are we having an influence? And to give just one example, I want to lift up the series that has been underway that has looked at, so this is hosted by the Department of Justice, but a 4-part series looking at cannabis in North Carolina. There are 3 of our recommendations, and these are some that I think when we talk about what might have the biggest impact, keeping people out of the system at the front end by not criminalizing possession of small amounts of marijuana was certainly one of our significant recommendations. So we recommended decriminalization. We recommended that departments can deprioritize. They can stop making a priority the marijuana-related arrests and prosecutions, and we recommended that there be a task force of stakeholders to study the pros and cons and options for legalization of possession. And so this 4-part series is a great step along the way in that. And so right after our meeting today, they're actually on session 3. And of course, all these are recorded, so you can view the recordings of them. But today they're talking about speakers looking at the way cannabis is grown and processed, but I especially want to highlight next Friday's webinar at 1 o'clock because the series will be talking about racial equity issues, including, some of the policy interventions might actually exacerbate racial inequities. So I think I just lift that up I was able to watch the first session, and even though we had one of our TREC meetings where some folks came in and talked with us about this issue, but having a full hour to hear from, I think there was someone from California, and I don't remember the other state, but there were some real experts on talking about medical marijuana, and I certainly learned a lot about how it actually isn't as medicinal as we might think, but they've been enormously helpful, so I recommend those to you. So I want to get us started this morning by actually hearing from all of you. So I'm going to call on you. And what I want to hear, I know we mostly know each other, but just introduce yourself, where you're joining us from today, if you're willing to divulge that information, but also give us your reflection on either something that you have learned from participating on the task force, something you appreciate about how the task force has operated, something we've achieved. And this is the context, or the framing I'll set up for this is, if we were to be meeting in person, I know that we would all be having conversations with each other at the beginning, before we sit down to start the meeting, and sharing reflections and interacting with each other in an informal way. And while I know it's harder to do that over Zoom, I'm asking us to have that kind of group initial impressions. So tell us something about what you think about the task force. And I'm just going to go down the list of attendees. And so that actually gives me the option of starting with Judge Thornburg. So if you would tell us where you are and what you think, some comments about the task force.
All right, good morning. I'm Alan Thornburg, and I'm in the Buncombe County Courthouse in my office. And my thoughts about the task force, we've done a lot, and I would say that a lot of the specific progress we've made has been in the legislature, and I want to thank our legislators on the committee for that. But I have also been impressed with the issues that have gained traction just by virtue of our discussions. So I don't want people, there's a tendency to say, well, we've talked a lot about some of these things, and have we really made progress? Well, I've seen a lot of progress in terms of putting these ideas forward. I mean, you can look at what the DAs are doing, what we're doing in the courts, what is happening with regard to training, the discussions around jury issues. I could go through the whole thing. And so I think a lot more progress has been made than we might realize. And when some of us who go out in the community and speak to civic groups and other members of the courthouse community, they know what we've been talking about. And these issues are much more at the forefront than they would have been. And I think there's a lot more change happening than you might realize. So that's a word of encouragement. We've got a lot of work to do, and I think we'll talk about some of that today. But I'm encouraged for the most part. And we've had one in-person meeting, and that was very rich to me. So I hope that these personal relationships can be advanced if we can get together again, because many times that's what comes away from these committees and task forces, is the relationships that are formed and the good that we can do because of those. So I hope that's the case here when we get together. So thank you, Madam Justice.
Great, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned the in-person meeting, because one thing I was going to raise at some appropriate point, but this might be the right time, is to get to suggest that our next task force meeting, next full task force meeting, be a hybrid meeting, and that we meet in person for those who can, and then allow for those who need to be virtual to be virtual as well. And that meeting is scheduled for July 15th at 10 a.m. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I hope that's something we can do, that health conditions will permit, and that we can meet in person the next time we meet. You all may have guessed I'm going alphabetical by first name. So Sergeant Garton, you are next.
Good morning, everyone. Billy Garton, coming from Raleigh Police Department here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I will say for me, it's been a very eye-opening experience, and I've enjoyed my time participating in the task force. If I had to point to one thing, I would say that we've taken on and shied away from any other conversation. Those difficult, crucial conversations that need to be had, we've had them both in our individual groups and as a collective task force. So we hadn't shied away from anything. So that's one of the things that I'm probably the most proud of. Our ability to form this task force in the heat what was the height of a very tense situation in time. And we were able to come together, and we've always been able to remain respectful for each other's thoughts and opinions. And I would say that the thing that's probably surprised me the most is the ability for everyone on this group to have an open mind, myself included. And I was quoted some time ago saying, if you had ever asked me about marijuana legalization, I would have been 100% against it. And I will say that the information that I've gleaned from this task force has led me to believe that it is not as important as I once thought. So for me, I have enjoyed my time working with each and every one of you, especially in our individual groups, and I've learned a lot. So I really appreciate it. And I hope to get to continue as long as this task force stays together. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Judge Clark.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm coming to you from Pembroke, from my home in Pembroke, North Carolina. I'm a district court judge in Robeson County. And just on a personal note, I think my involvement and participation with the task force has brought a greater sense of awareness of the ability I have to impact and touch others and what my responsibilities are. And as a result of the work that the task force has done, it's made me a better judge. And I've recently had discussions with the superintendent here, our chief district court judge, about implementing a better school justice partnership. We've talked about bail reform. We've talked about implementation of the AOCCR 415, and we're starting to see a lot of individuals in this county utilize that form and just take advantage of the resources out there. So that's what I wanted this year. I think my participation has made me a better judge. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Chief Hawkins, you're next on my list.
Good morning, Justice Earls. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to share. So I am coming from Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I'm actually got the honor of being tagged in after most of the heavy lift of the first year from Chief Davis before she left out. But because this has been my profession for over 30 something years, and never did I imagine I'd be doing this long. But now that I can't even imagine doing anything else in this profession, but being a part of this task force. Can you still hear me? Someone's trying to call in. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The task force, since even starting, was exciting, because there is a lot of work that has been done that many of us in law enforcement have already been doing. But this is putting the onus on the masses now to highlight what we all can be doing consistently, what we all are able to do collaboratively, what we all can understand from the other systems, and truly understand holistically from our community perspective. So the task force is making movement, making changes, even if those changes are bite-sized changes. One action is still movement. So as we take each movement, everyone takes their part. It's very exciting to me. So no one's ever going to not be able to say that it does make a difference, and it is making a difference. It's documented. It's a platform. It's a manual that to get everything started, especially in my profession, and for the community to be educated and aware. So I'm super excited about it.
Great, thank you so much. Next, I have Sheriff Birkhead.
Thank you, Justice Earls. Sheriff Birkhead, coming from Durham County. The work that we're doing on the task force has been extremely rewarding for me. I, like Chief Hawkins, came in after my colleague passed away, Sheriff Clemens, and so really a bulk of the work was already done, as has been mentioned. But where we are now is implementation and model policy review and making recommendations and moving toward implementation is very rewarding. And I've been doing this work for, actually today, I start my 39th year in law enforcement. So who would have thought that 1984 I'd be here? But these are issues that I have identified all throughout my career. Being a Black man in law enforcement and recognizing some of the inequities. And I am so happy and honored to be part of the conversation now as we elevate law enforcement all across North Carolina. We develop consistencies and professionalism and really raise the game for law enforcement practitioners. And it is rewarding. Some of my most personal moments of learning and recognizing who I am have come through reflection and introspection. And the task force work for me is doing that for law enforcement, doing that for the criminal justice system. We are examining ourselves and how we can improve the system. And it is extremely exciting to be part of the work that's going on here in North Carolina. And I know other states are watching us. Other states are really trying to model and catch up. And to be a leader in this space is truly a blessing for me. And I enjoy every moment of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go next to Deborah Dix Maxwell.
Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings from the city of 1898 along the coast called Wilmington, North Carolina. It has been a pleasure to be on this task force because of the relationships, as people have mentioned, with those of you within the task force, and also those that I've done advocating for what we are doing throughout my community and through the state. I have seen changes. I get calls from people and emails, and I told them about the part where they could come today. So I'm thankful to see the changes that are coming. I know that there are more to come, because whether this task force is here or not, we will continue to seek for equality in the justice system for the citizens of North Carolina. Unfortunately, July the 15th is the start of the NAACP National Conference in Atlantic City. So I will be virtual that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Leslie Cooley-Dismukes. Leslie? Okay.
Thank you, Justice Earls. I didn't know I was going to get to speak. I apologize.
Yep, everyone gets their turn.
Well, great. Well, for me, I think that one of the most fulfilling parts of this experience has been working with this group of individuals and actually getting to see our results on the back end. I think, especially as I will talk about later, our work on the commissions, I think we have seen a lot of things happen there. And with Senate Bill 300, being able to be a part of that and be a part of this has been really, really rewarding. And so I am very thankful and I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you. Next, I have Cynthia Thornton.
Good morning. I'm Cynthia Thornton. I'm the Director of Performance and Standards for Prisons, and I'm with you today on behalf of Commissioner Ishii, who had a conflicting obligation. I have been the director responsible for gathering the information and creating the presentations and documents that have been provided to you on previous meetings. And I've done that with the assistance of several other directors who are actually work group chairs. So it is certainly not just myself working on this. I just am the one that's tasked with organizing and getting the updates presented for you.
Thank you. Next, we have Secretary Buffalo.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Justice Earl. As some of my colleagues on the call, I'm joining the task force on the heels of the retirement of Secretary Hooks. So I'm honored to be part of this task force and to represent DPS as a whole. But I'm also happy about the work that this task force has done. My previous career as a police chief, that we impact and address issues and policies and procedures for law enforcement that affect our communities of color. And I'm definitely proud to be part of this team to have these difficult conversations, but not only conversations, but come out with positive solutions that help us all within the criminal justice system. So thank you for the opportunity this morning. And I come to you from the Archdale building here in Raleigh.
Wonderful. Next, I have Greg Saban.
Good morning. I'm Greg Saban, Communications and Policy Coordinator in the Attorney General's Office. I'm at DOJ in downtown Raleigh. I think from a staff perspective, it's just been great to see all the time commitment that the TREC members and our external partners have put in. It's made it easy to do this work, and thank you all for your partnership.
Thank you. Holly Jones, you're next.
Yes, thank you. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, sporting my team color here, but I just will echo what Greg mentioned, and from the staff perspective is that I think the thing that's been that I want to share is the profound commitment of time, as well as heart, as well as brains that the task force members have brought to the work that I've been interfaced with. It's been very inspiring. I've learned a lot, and that's not always the case with task force members. So it's been a pleasure, and I'm very grateful that I've had this opportunity.
Thank you. We have Chief Smythe next.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jeff Smythe, no longer a chief judge, now a retired chief, and I work at CJ Standards. And so in that role, I travel around the state. I engage with groups of police chiefs and other policing professionals in small group meetings. And I continue to be impressed at the mostly advocacy, sometimes trepidation from those groups, but often a lot of appreciation for the work that we're doing. They're well engaged in following this group's work. So I think that's important for this group to recognize that they are fully engaged. And from my perspective, I really appreciate the collegial nature of this group. We tackle from diverse camps, we tackle really critical issues, and we've had productive discourse in every meeting that I've attended. It's been remarkable, and I'm honored to be part of the group. And I am currently at an accreditation conference in Orlando, Florida. So I'm way far out of the state of North Carolina. And then lastly, I've got a meeting at 11 that I have to be in, so I'll tap out relatively soon, but I appreciate everyone's participation in the group. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. And so we'll turn, next is Kerwin Pittman.
Morning, everybody. My name is Kerwin Pittman. What I've learned being on this task force is a lot. My eyes have been open to a lot of different things. I think I may be the youngest member on the task force, and kind of came into this thing. Yeah, I'm gonna put it out there, Sergeant Garden. But I came into this, this task force kind of thinking that I would be able to move mountains in a matter of months, and realize that the road to justice is long, and that this will be a fight not only in the years to come, but probably for the rest of my life. And it made me commit more to that fight, but also as well as even sparring of opinions with Sergeant Garden and then at the time Secretary Hooks. It just made me sharpen a lot of my game and really look at policies and procedures even more. And I remember one time when Chief Hawkins, I believe she came to our working group, and we was sparring back and forth, me, Secretary Hooks, and Sergeant Garden, and Secretary Hooks stopped and he said, Chief Hawkins, don't be alarmed. This is just three brothers just going at it, exchanging opinions. And it made me realize then at that moment it was all, and I always knew it was all in love, but it made me realize that we each had a love for our community. And we each was passionate about making a change in our community. And so that right there opened my eyes to another wave of different things and another thought. But most importantly, being on this task force gave me an opportunity to look behind what I say is the iron curtain and see how things kind of are made. And as Leslie would say, how the sausage is made. And so being able to view that has gave me a strategic opinion to sit in a strategic position between being a social justice advocate and activist, to also being engaged in these high level stake meetings and voicing the concerns of people who are really on the ground and suffering every day due to collateral consequences from a criminal justice system that is baked with racial inequities. And so it's gave me that position to be able to take what's being said in these rooms and translate it to the people in the community, and what's being said in the community and translate it to the people, particularly in these settings. And so I'm honored to be able to do that. But most importantly, this has made me really pay attention to the implementation phase of things. I really learned that the devil is in the details, and not to say that every recommendation and implementation of that recommendation had devil in the details of it. But seeing some of our recommendations fall short made me want to fight even much more harder. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm thankful for continuing to give me more fire from being on this task force. And I appreciate each and every member, as well as staff. I've learned a lot and created some great relationships, and look forward to continuing to cultivate those relationships.
Great. Thank you so much. Representative Morey, you're next.
Good morning, Marcia Morey, and I am calling you from one of the most dangerous places in the state of North Carolina. I am on the border of Chapel Hill and Durham. So we'll see what happens tomorrow night. But this has been a phenomenal experience. And I think, the diversity of this group and how we all came together. I mean, I was one of the chairs of the 4 groups, and we had a prosecutor, we had a defense attorney, we had conservatives for criminal justice reform, county commissioner. All of us came from such a diverse place, and we all listened to the data, put it together, and got these recommendations out. It's like Kerwin, we've made some progress. We've gotten the youngest kids out of the juvenile court system. We've gotten mandatory first appearances in 72 hours. We wanted it shorter. We've taken some steps. We have a lot more steps to go. I feel like we're just starting, and I hope we hold this together. And I think a lot of the success of this has been our staff. So, Ellen and Natalia and Greg and Leslie, and who am I missing? Jasmine, Ellen, you all have been phenomenal to have us organized, keep us going, and the strong support of staff has really been amazing. I look forward to keeping going, and I hope everyone does too. It's not all legislative. It's in the executive branch. It's in, the law enforcement. It's in our communities, and we have a lot of work to do, but it's exciting work. So thank you, Justice Earls.
Thank you. Next, I have Mike Deniska. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing.
Yes, ma'am. You pronounced it perfectly. Mike Deniska, the Director for the Office of Policy and Strategic Planning at the Department of Public Safety, calling in from the Archdale building in downtown Raleigh this morning. Like some others who spoke previously, I was not involved from the very beginning. My involvement really came online about a year ago when then Chief Deputy Secretary Pam Cashwell left DPS to become the secretary at the Department of Administration. So Kerwin, I missed out on some of those sparring sessions that you mentioned, but knowing Secretary Hooks, I'm sure they were very professional and very engaging, and I'm sure everybody was learning on both sides from what was being talked about. For me, over the past year, and primarily as now Secretary Cashwell was doing at the time that she was involved, most of my involvement has primarily been providing staff support internally here at the Department of Public Safety as far as coordinating exchange of information, requests for information between the TREC staff and our DPS agencies, as well as tracking progress by DPS agencies in terms of implementing TREC recommendations. And for me, one of the things, whenever I talk to anybody about my involvement with the TREC over the past year plus, the thing that I always mention is how impressed I have been at the accomplishments of this body. Over the years, I've been involved in a variety of work groups and task forces and Currently, I'm plugged into 3 other task forces or boards and commissions in addition to the TREC. And from my perspective, from what I've witnessed the TREC do over the past year and a half plus, to me, it's very impressive, not only making 125 recommendations, but then shifting gears and focusing on implementation, getting legislation changed, getting programs implemented, getting policies updated, coordinating with a variety of stakeholders from local agencies to state agencies to advocacy groups. I mean, the legislature, the governor's office, the judicial branch. To me, it's been very impressive to see everything this body has accomplished. And I know there's a lot of recommendations that still need to be tackled, that a lot of us want additional progress to be made on. But huge shout out to this group, to the staff for what it has accomplished, because it has done a lot. It has definitely done a lot.
Thank you. Next, we have Mike Hawkins.
Thank you, Justice Earls. I am Mike Hawkins. I'm up in Brevard this morning. It's a beautiful spring morning up here in Brevard. And I am a member of the local group, the local committee, subcommittee. And thinking about what I've taken away from my experience with TREC so far, it's really 2 things. The first thing is something that Representative Morey talked about, is just the quality of the DOJ staff, the people that we've worked with, people that I've worked with anyway, and speaking specifically about Greg and Holly and Jasmine and Ellen and Jeff Welty before he left to go back to the School of Government. They're just at the very highest level. And the task force could not have accomplished any of the things that it's accomplished without what the staff has done. So that's one thing. Another thing that I'll touch on is that really law enforcement related. We have in the local committee, we have a law enforcement advisory group, and we're going to talk about that when we get to our part just for a moment. But I've just been so impressed, and it's people from around the state. There are some members of the task force on that group. Sheriff Birkhead's on the group, Chief Hawkins is on the group, Sergeant Garden, Director Smythe is on the group, but it's mostly people from outside TREC, and we have brought them issues every month, recommendations and other issues to discuss and give us their opinions about. And it's just so impressive. That group of people is so impressive. They're so thoughtful and so dedicated to serving their citizens, whether it be at the city level or the county level or at the state level with highway patrol officers. I'm just so impressed with that. And I just wanted to mention that. So it's been an honor to do this, and I look forward to us. The last thing I would say, and it's been said also, but it's easy to make recommendations. The real work is getting things implemented, and I'm so happy to be part of this group, because that is our orientation, is to not just have the recommendations, but see what we can do to get these things actually taking place in North Carolina. So that's it. That's it for me, except go Heels. Thank you, Holly. Go Heels.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Mohammed.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Justice Charles. Appreciate the opportunity. I am here at Charlotte, Mecklenburg, our wonderful Mecklenburg County Courthouse, representing my wonderful clients at the Mecklenburg County Public Defender's Office right now, which is why you don't see my face. But I'm very grateful to be a part of this wonderful team. You've heard from everyone else. I think we've all had a very collaborative group here, everybody from community advocates, elected officials, our wonderful law enforcement representatives, our judges, our justice involved individuals, disability rights. I mean, the list could go on, but most importantly, it's been great to hear as a state senator as well from so many constituents and folks that are actually listening in, who've been part of the public input and the listening sessions, emailing us, contacting us, calling us, giving us their feedback. And it's great to see our progress. Just this last session, you heard Representative Morey talk about it. She gave you a list. It's great and exciting that we've been able to actually pass a number of bills in the North Carolina General Assembly That was exactly part of this task force work. So hats off to each of you, but most importantly, I do want to thank this amazing staff. Couldn't have been able to do this wonderful work without each of them. So can't thank you all enough. And of course, Justice Earl, can't thank you and Attorney General Stein for your leadership enough. Many thanks.
Thank you. Next I have Natalia Botea.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Natalia Botea with the Governor's Office. And also on a personal note, I'll just mention, I joined the Governor's Office in June of 2020. We formed the task force just a couple weeks later. And that time was very intimidating to join and to work exclusively on criminal justice issues, because I recognized kind of the weight of the moment and wanted to see us take advantage of it and succeed. And just getting to spend, the entirety of my time in the Governor's Office working with this group has been an enormous privilege. It's really accelerated my understanding both of the issues and just getting to know all of you as really incredible leaders in the state. I draw on what I've learned from each of you on almost a daily basis. I think I could point to something from every single one here about how it's shaped my understanding of these issues. And Judge Morey's going to be talking about the Juvenile Sentence Review Board, but that has really been a highlight for me professionally. I don't think it would have happened without this group, and I just really see it as an affirmation of kind of the basic human dignity that we all have, and the capacity for change, and how important that understanding is to the entirety of the criminal justice system. So thank you all.
Thank you. Next, I have Mercedes Restuccia Clem.
Good morning. Yes, thank you, Justice Earls. I'm Mercedes Restuccia Clem. I'm Outreach and Policy Counsel with the Public Protection Section at the North Carolina Department of Justice. And I have been working with the task force since the beginning. It has been really a whirlwind and a privilege to do so. I worked pretty closely with the post-conviction working group as substantive staff, as well as working with the Judicial Committee on implementing some of the recommendations that fall under that arena, primarily in fines and fees and prosecutorial working group. And it's been, again, a really an honor to be able to do the work. And I think the most memorable thing to me, or the most meaningful thing to me, is that we do now have a document, dated 2020, that is from the state of North Carolina, really highlighting some of the important issues that we're facing right now in this historic moment. And we'll be able to reference it going forward in the work in the years and generations to come.
Great, thank you. Next I have Reggie Boney.
Good morning, everyone. I am greeting you from Durham, North Carolina. Okay. I'm also adorning my Carolina blue today, go Heels. I'm a policy analyst with the Governor's Office, and I joined the team in November of last year, so I'm still fairly new, but I have enjoyed the job thus far. And I guess one of the highlights for me is really being able to work with such an amazing staff. Everyone is just so astute when it comes to these matters, substantively and also with process. I think Kerwin hit the nail on the head when he talked about, learning about how things work and how what processes need to take place in order to achieve justice and equity. And so I've really been learning and gaining knowledge from the team and the staff. And I just want to say again how amazing they are. Specifically, I work with the committee too, the Judicial Committee, and also with the Prosecutorial Advisory Group. And I'm really excited about that group, and it seems to have a lot of momentum, and the district attorneys seem to be really excited. And so I'm excited to see what work we will continue to do for TREC through them. And so that's all I have for you today. Good to see everybody.
Great, thank you.
Welcome,
next,
Justice Earl.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Smith, you're next on my list.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Can you hear me pretty well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ronnie Smith, County Commissioner in Martin County. I'm the immediate past president of North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. Today I'm in Beaufort, North Carolina. We have a North Carolina Association County Commissioner Board of Directors meeting going on the next 2 days, and I found a nice quiet corner that I could sit and talk and be part of this meeting. I want to thank Mike Hawkins, because Mike and I represent the county commissioners, the commissioners around the state of North Carolina. I just want to thank everybody that have been part of this great task force, because the thing that I have truly been able to see and gain is that through information from this task force passing on to the commissioners throughout the state of North Carolina is awareness. And when you're not aware of an issue, it's hard to even consider trying to tackle and solving the issues. But this task force and each of the members that are on this task force have been so passionate about the work, and everybody's up here as a volunteer. And I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to work with you. Yes, we have 125 recommendations. There are a lot of things out there that we didn't have an opportunity to bring to the forefront, but I'm looking forward that we're going to continue with this progress as years to come. And thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to be part of this great team. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sam Davis.
Hi, everyone. Sam Davis, Justice Earls' law clerk. I've been working with the task force for over a year now. I'm calling from San Francisco after a late flight last night, so apologies in advance for my incoherence. But one thing that I've really come to appreciate as part of this task force is just how much work goes into systems change or attempts to change systems. And what has been really inspiring has just been everyone's persistence, staff, task force members, advocates who have continued to push the task force. It's just kind of amazed by everyone's persistence and willingness to come together to try and build a coalition to make North Carolina a more just place. So I very much just appreciated learning from everyone and getting to be a small part of this work.
Great, thank you. Next is Tally Wells.
Hi, everyone. I'm in Washington, D.C. We just wrapped up a week of meeting with our congressional delegation. I'm the executive director of the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, and this is our annual trip to raise awareness of disability issues. For me, as Sam just talked about and Representative Morey has talked about, systems change is hard, and what I've appreciated is the all-in approach that this group has taken, and particularly the impact the staff that folks have already mentioned have made to make this possible. But to approach it, such critical issues, not just from a legislative standpoint, although that's been very important, but also through the judiciary, through the executive branch, through local and state governments, through data, through our philanthropic community, and through communications. I think really understanding that there needed to be a multi-level approach has been really critical. I'm super proud of Representative Morey and Senator Mohammed and the Republican delegation and all the folks who helped get SB 300 through, and the juvenile reforms that Representative Morey talked about. I mean, these are small steps in what we feel like is, well, what is a 200-year, 300, 400-year struggle. And obviously we're only making so much progress, but it's been a very concerted push that I'm hugely proud of. I've been particularly interested in what's happening to children in schools and what will happen, keeping them out of the criminal justice system. And very grateful to the governor's office and Natalia for moving forward with our data recommendations and working with the Department of Public Instruction to figure out how we can collect better data. I think that is moving forward. Also, just throw in the chat, we've got a couple folks coming to specifically talk about language deficits and the relationship to behavior that I think is going to be of real interest to this task force and for students that's coming up in a couple weeks. So I'll throw that in the chat. But I'm grateful to be with all of you and that this work is going to continue. And I think one of the big issues that we're going to really want to think through is how we sustain this effort, how we keep this work going, and what that looks like, not just in the next 9 months, but the next 2 years to a decade. Thanks.
Thank you. And next I have Tara Callahan.
Thank you, Justice Earls, and thank you all of you for everything that's been said. I don't think I echo everything that's been said, and I don't think I can say it any more eloquently. I think in terms of the long road to justice that Kerwin referenced, I was in a perinatal incarceration task force meeting. I joined the task force several years ago, and we were talking about this, a dramatic need for reform in the way that pregnant women were treated while incarcerated. And it seemed like such a far-fetched, reality that we would see that these reforms that we were looking at. And in the last meeting, we were explaining the specifics of the dignity bill that passed and codified all of these very important considerations for women's health and nutritional needs and everything while incarcerated. And instead of, wishing that we could see this law passed, we were discussing, the ways in which we can really ensure successful implementation through basic law enforcement training, working with the Justice Academy, things that we never expected we would be having, and conversations that are certainly farther advanced by the work of the people on this screen. So it's just been an absolute honor, and thank you all.
Well, thank you, everyone. That has been enormously helpful, both as I think about, and we all think together about how we continue this work, but also I just really appreciate all of your time. I am deeply amazed and in awe of the incredible talent that we have here this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in and have we're going to talk about 2 recent successes just so everyone's aware. And the first is the ability to pay rule, and Sam Davis is going to quickly talk us through that.
Thank you, Justice Earls. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I'm excited to share an update. This is regarding Recommendation 101, which was a recommendation that the Supreme Court enact a general rule of practice requiring an assessment of a defendant's ability to pay before levying fines and fees. So this recommendation, it was part of a set of recommendations aimed at reducing the impact of fines and fees and other monetary obligations in the criminal justice system. We know from the research, including really powerful research from the Equal Access to Justice Commission, that the imposition of these monetary obligations without regard for defendant's ability to pay, it's inequitable at the outset because it conditions a defendant's punishment on their economic status rather than the severity of the crime. And it also has long-term collateral consequences because failure to pay these obligations can trigger kind of a cascading set of consequences, such as license suspension and revocation, which really compounds the problem in the first place. So as you see on the screen, last December, the Supreme Court adopted General Rule of Practice 28, which is titled the Equitable Imposition of Monetary Obligations in Criminal Cases and Infraction Cases based on the defendant's ability to pay. This became effective at the beginning of this year. Maybe we go to the next slide. So you can see the rule here. But what it does is it creates a defined procedural mechanism for defendants to motion for relief from costs, fines, fees, and other monetary obligations on equitable grounds based on the defendant's ability to pay. I want to call out two aspects of the rule that I think are important. So one, it's available to defendants both before a judge imposes monetary obligations, but also as an avenue to seek relief from monetary obligations that have already been imposed. The second aspect that I think is important is that once a defendant files the motion, the court must rule on it before imposing monetary obligations, and the court may conduct a hearing if necessary to get more information. If we could go to the next slide. So another aspect that I think is really valuable, and Judge Clark mentioned this earlier actually, is the new form adopted by the Administrative Office of the Courts. So we heard consistently from many stakeholders that the old form used for these kinds of motions was just, it was too complicated. Defendants didn't know how to use it. It was convoluted. It didn't provide useful information to judges. So we think this shortened form should really streamline the process and make it easier for both defendants to share accurate information about their financial status, but also for judges to understand that information and then exercise their discretion in a way that serves justice. We really do want to thank everyone who's involved, both in creating this form and also in advocating for the rule change. It's or the adoption of a rule. It's been a long time coming. We work closely with folks from the School of Government, heard from the Fines and Fees Coalition, and this is something that Committee 2, which I've worked with for much of this last year, has really been focused on and pushed. So there's a lot more work to be done. We had a whole set of recommendations around fines and fees and monetary obligations. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing to implement this rule later on when we share an update on Committee 2. But I think on the whole, we're just really encouraged by this step and hope it will make a difference, really throughout the state. So again, thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask at this point? Please feel free to raise your hands or use chat at any point, particularly if you have questions. But I'm going to turn next to Representative Morey to tell us about the Juvenile Sentence Review Board.
Thank you. I think this is one of the most exciting things that we're doing, and it came from the TREC recommendations 95 and 97, kind of a combination of both. And the governor issued an executive order last April establishing the Juvenile Sentencing Review Board. And this is to look at any juvenile who is under the age of 18 who had been sentenced to more than 15 years to look at their sentence, to look at it with justice and mercy to see if they would be deserving to be considered for clemency or a commutation. We're not talking a pardon, but we're looking at clemency. So the governor appointed 4 of us to be on the Sentencing Review Board. I'm the chair of it. And that we're not a bunch of diehard, softies. We have 2 former U.S. attorneys, Mickey Michaud, Thomas Walker, and a federal judge, Allison Duncan. And I'm a former prosecutor and judge as well. So we work with Ben Fenholt at the Wilson Center at Duke Law School. They have taken on the task of reaching out to about 310 eligible petitioners, meaning 310 juveniles at the time of their sentence who would be eligible to be reviewed for clemency. They've been given pro bono attorneys, or they hire attorneys, or they have advocates that help them prepare petitions to be reviewed by the review board. So we started getting petitions in the fall, and with the assistance of the governor's clemency office, and Natalia, of course, has been monumental in the help on this, and Greg McLeod has been on this, and Robert Guy. But the 4 of us get together, usually it's on Zoom, and we start reviewing the petitions. Some of these petitions are 300 pages long. Not all of them, but it's quite a job. And what we look at is we look at what was the crime, what is the petitioner's remorse, what is their statement about it. We especially look at what has happened over the 15, 20, 25, 30 years that these people have been in prison. What successes have they made? What certificates have they gotten? What educational degrees have they gotten? What are letters of recommendation? And then what is a reentry plan? You know, if the governor does consider commuting their sentence, how strong of a reentry and support would they have back in the community? So we've gone over more than 20 cases. We have a lot of work to do. We meet at least once, twice a month for several hours. And if you have followed the news, a week ago today, 3 individuals who were granted clemency walked out of prison. One had served over 30 years, almost over twice her life when she was sentenced at the age of 15. The other had served 25 years and the other 20 years. On a personal note, I've had the pleasure and the honor to meet one of these people and to see the maturity, the thankfulness, the determination she's going to give back to this community in exceptional ways. I couldn't have felt better about this work. These people have shown they are not a danger to society, very few infractions. They have worked for decades to overcome a harm they did as a juvenile. So this is exciting work. This is because of TREC. This is because of all of you agreeing to these recommendations, and really appreciate Justice Earls being able to just mention it. The work goes on, but I hope it's something we can all be very proud of. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Representative Morey? Well, thank you so much for your work and for that report. So then next, that brings us to Tara to talk with us about the TREC communication activities.
Good morning, everyone. So it's been an absolute honor working with the comms team so far. The fact sheets were instrumental to passage of the bills that we worked with. The focus groups really were eye-opening in terms of, I think, how people see these issues. Following the strategic planning, we've decided to sort of shift our focus from a standalone to more of a support role for the other 3 committees, the local, legislative, and judicial. So I guess to that end, we've begun working on several projects that Ellen will go into in a bit more detail as soon as I stop talking. And we just want to make sure to invite each of you as members of those committees, and then as members generally of the task force, to please reach out to me or members of the communications committee if you have any questions or issues that you'd really like to flag to be top of mind for us. Thank you.
Hey y'all, I just wanted to flag 2 projects that we are working on in the sort of communications realm. We are going to start doing a TREC newsletter that'll go out to the TREC listserv and to all of y'all. We are looking to highlight different news stories about programs that are related to TREC recommendations that may be starting up or have made significant progress. We're also looking to highlight grant opportunities within that newsletter, and also any upcoming events for TREC. So things like our learning series, our full task force meetings, our committee meetings, those will all be located in there. We're looking to get the first one out next week. So please be on the lookout for that. And please do disseminate to any of your groups that you may be involved with. We want to make sure that lots of people see this. And then something else we're working on that really ties into the local committee is we're working on a TREC. Well, it's a program map around TREC recommended programs that are focused on reimagining public safety and other support services. So we're right now trying to get a list of all different types of programs that are in place across the state. I think violence prevention programs, alternative response, different expunction programs, and looking to get that into like a map so that there'll be a place on the TREC website that members of the public or different individuals that are engaged in this work, either in a government sense or in a community-based way, can just take a look at what's already going on in the state and know that if they want to contact another point of contact at these programs, they have a way to do that. We're really excited about this, and we will keep the task force appraised. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think that brings us to having a report from our committees, and I'm going to start with the Executive Committee, and I believe Leslie is going to give us that report.
Thank you, Justice Earls. Good morning, everybody. I think we're going to do this in two parts, and so I'm going to talk to you guys about the updates from the commission, and then I'm going to hand it off to Cynthia Thornton with DPS. So from the commission standpoint, we are actually moving forward with a lot of the TREC recommendations, which is really exciting. And I think I alluded to that earlier, as did Chief Smythe. But we have passed in both commissions the joint rules, which is TREC recommendation 54. So we have, as of this week, passed both sets of rules to bring both the Sheriff's Commission and the CJ Commission in line with one another. And so that was our TREC recommendation, because we felt that it should be a priority to make sure that anyone who carries a badge and a gun should be held to the same set of minimum standards. And so by now making those minimum standards for each commission the same, we have done that. So that's very exciting that we have realized that recommendation. Also, that was sent to the legislature by April 1st, which I guess is today, was the best practices for recruitment and retention. And that was recommendation 51. So we have completed that. That has been sent to the legislature. We're very proud of that document. I think we had an advisory group from both commissions that worked really hard to recognize and realize that TREC recommendation. And I think that's going to be a great thing for agencies to use statewide. Also, our joint study regarding physical fitness, the commissions have worked with Appalachian State to conduct that joint study and have had the report out, so to speak, and that has also gone to the legislature. Senate Bill 300 had mandated deadlines, April 1st deadlines for both of those reports, and we have complied with that. So the commissions have made that happen, voted to adopt both of those, and that was recommendation 60. So I feel like we have moved the ball quite a bit over the past couple months in making the TREC recommendations a reality. We have a ways to go with some other things. There are a couple things we're still looking at and working on. For example, peaceful demonstrations. Those recommendations in the TREC report were 27, 28, and 29. They're in process in various ways, one of which is through the new BLET revamp, which is currently happening through the Justice Academy and the commissions, working to reorganize and kind of reinvigorate BLET. So some of that will include peaceful demonstration instruction, but also working to create best practices for agencies. And I think that part of that is going to be done through mandatory in-service training. And that is being created as well. So I think that those are all in progress. And we have been having lots of discussions surrounding minimum standards with respect to use of force. And that is very much a topic that is still alive in discussion. And I think probably our next steps for the commission will be to consider some of those concepts. And I know that we've been having a lot of TREC conversations surrounding those topics, and I look forward to marshaling that through the commissions as well. So very exciting progress thus far, exciting things to be moving forward with. And I think that that's all I have for commissions. And so I'll hand it off to Cynthia Thornton, who is the Director of Performance Standards for DPS Division of Prisons, to give the second half of our executive update, which is the prisons side of the house. So thank you, Justice Earls.
Good morning again, everyone. This is Cynthia Thornton. I have worked for the Division of Prisons for just over 31 years. So obviously in that amount of time, I have seen a lot of change in the way that we do business, and TREC has been a positive challenge for us to continue to look at ways that we can make changes. We did do a detailed presentation a couple of weeks ago, and today I've been asked to just give a brief summary of some of the highlights of things that we have accomplished. If I don't go over anything that anyone has questions about, I'm certainly happy to do that for you today. I guess I would start with our accreditation efforts. We have set a goal for ourselves to be a fully accredited system through the American Correctional Association, which is the standard for corrections in accreditation. That task is one of the divisions that I have. And so we currently have 8 facilities that are fully accredited and 2 scheduled for their on-site audits in June. And we are about to announce either 5 or 6 additional facilities that we will be accrediting through the fall and the winter. And one of those, or possibly 2, will be our first facilities that have restrictive housing. And what that means for us is that we take on a full chapter of expected practices that we have not yet, that will make revisions to our policies for restrictive housing about how long an offender can be in restrictive housing, both hours and days, and different checks that will be conducted by custody staff as well as program staff, mental health staff, and medical staff. In regards to our victimization work, we have implemented a 24-hour screening that is new and an additional 30-day follow-up that screens both for victimization and aggressors and uses that information as soon as the offender arrives at the facility to make housing assignments immediately, and then in the future making program assignments that can benefit the offender. We did implement our portion of the dignity law that was passed and are continuing to look at ways past that we can make changes for our pregnant offenders to include today. We have a new policy being published that requires an automatic review of every pregnant offender for the maternity leave program. That automatic review will be new. The offender will no longer have to ask to be reviewed. We will be doing that automatically. I think a couple of other topics that have a lot of interest when we have our meetings are all of the additional programs that we have implemented. One being the tablets. We are still working through with our vendor, every offender having access to a tablet. That will be regardless of whether they are in restrictive housing or whether they are in general population. We have 6 facilities completely live with tablets, 5 that are currently having infrastructure installed, 13 with cabling being worked, and 8 additional that are almost completed and expected to come live in the next few weeks. Every offender has access when they have the tablet to various programs and applications to include libraries and law libraries, dictionaries, calculators, different programs like calming literature they can review. They have music streaming, sports, games like Angry Birds and chess, different news feeds available, messaging applications that they can stay in touch with family and friends with. The facility communicate with them. They can send messages to them. For example, maybe vaccination messages or a new program that's starting that they can sign up for and who to see to get their name on the list for that. They have a program called Breaking Free, which is evidence-based substance use and abuse application that they can do at their own self-pace. We're working on taking our offender requests to communicate with staff to have their questions or concerns answered to the tablet rather than a paper system. We're working on a learning management system that the offenders will be able to enroll in different courses through the tablet. And we're looking to take some of our services like diagnostic and intake, ADA requests, PREA, things like that to the tablet as well in the future. And then I think the other topic that received a lot of attention on our last update was all of our educational programs that have managed to be continued and expanded through COVID, which in itself was a challenge with the different cohorts that we had. But we have restorative justice circles being conducted at Central Prison and about to start back at Women's Prison. We are expanding STOP, which is our domestic violence program at Albemarle, so that there will be an expansion there. We have another rehabilitative diversion unit expanding at Pasquotank, in addition to our other sites that are already operational. And then we are looking at funding to expand MATCH or a MATCH-like program to Anson Correctional Institution for Women. Each time we expand that, we'll be looking for funding sources, because our MATCH program in Raleigh, though they are willing to help us with that, does not have the funding for other locations. And then our 13 reentry facilities that were established, that the FRESH grant that Director Cobb's section is working with, that will add pocket programs, which are apps on the tablets to help offenders with reentry. We have reaching out from within classes that are helping offenders with self-help, community engagement, kindness, courage, speaking up against violence. Those are some of the courses there. And then I think it's important to go over just a few of our degree programs that we were able to expand through this, and that was Second Chance Pell Grants at Craggy Correctional Center and Western Correctional Center for Women. We have the first liberal arts degree program through Campbell and Sampson Correctional Institution that's had its first graduation. They've also implemented a Bachelor of Arts there that is also through Sampson and Campbell. We have a 2-year online agribusiness degree that is implemented at Hyde through Beaufort Community College. And Pamlico has implemented and had their first graduation along with Pamlico Community College for a human service technology degree. And then lastly, though the field minister program at Nash Correctional Institution started prior to this, they did have their first graduation along with the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. And they have graduated 24 students and deployed them into 5 facilities where they work with offenders in those facilities on a day-to-day basis. So those are kind of some of our highlights, in addition to working to continue to expand our mental health programming and our crisis intervention training for staff. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to go over those at this time.
Does anyone have any questions? Representative Morey.
Thank you. And it's probably more of a comment, but Cynthia, thanks for all that great work. I apologize, I had a phone call just come in. And this may seem very minor, but it is a big deal when people are released, that they have to have adequate IDs. One of the people that got clemency, I have a copy of a piece of paper that is cut off. Who issued this? There's no real date of issuance. They run into huge obstacles when they go to DMV or if they go to the bank to open a bank account. And I hope this is just a very simple thing that we can do once people are granted release, that they have a good ID that will be acceptable to open a bank account, to get a driver's license or an ID, but it can create big barriers if they walk out and they can't show who they are. Anyway, just a suggestion. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. And I would add that we do have a program with DMV where they do come into some of our facilities and provide those IDs, and we are working to expand that to other facilities. There has been some challenges with that because of COVID, but hopefully now that we seem to be on on the positive side of COVID, we'll be able to get that expanded even more. But yes, ma'am, we do have that started and are working on expanding it further with Director Sarah Cobb.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Okay. Well,
I have one.
Oh, please go ahead. Yes.
Ms. Thornton, thank you for what you said. Now, help me out. Are all the DMVs engaged in the license, the ID program throughout the state? I couldn't understand whether you meant some or was some other entity you were trying to engage with.
It would just be some of DMVs now because we don't have it in all of our facilities yet. That was a program that was started pre-COVID, pre the task force, and COVID kind of delayed our spread. But Director Cobb is working to engage all that we can to get it spread to all of our facilities, because all of our facilities do releases. She's focusing first on the facilities that are reentry facilities that do the highest number of releases, but it will be our goal to spread it throughout our system.
Thank you. And I know that we have only 17 reentry councils throughout the state. Does your department also work with helping with the creation of increasing those? Because we have 100 counties.
Actually, Nicole Sullivan's section in the Secretary's office works with that, and our staff are involved in providing support as needed, but they are the direct contact with the reentry councils. But yes, we are also open to expanding those as they find communities that are willing to partner with us.
You said her name was Nicole Sullivan?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Justice Earls, this month, Mr. Singleton, who was the head of the reentry program at Craven Community College, was recognized as the State Community College Employee of the Year, someone who has turned his life around after coming out and working towards helping others change their lives upon coming out.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the call have any more information they want to add about the reentry questions, or does anyone have any other questions for Committee 1?
This is Kerwin Pittman, and I know particularly DPS sector is kind of in my subcommittee. And so I just had one question. I'm pretty sure y'all may have told me this before, but I just wanted to know and kind of put it in my notes. How many staff and officers have already been CIT trained, and kind of what is the timeline to have everybody fully CIT trained?
So since CIT was implemented, we have trained 8,144. Now that number is about 2 weeks old. That was when I pulled the numbers for the update we gave a couple of weeks ago. In addition to that, we have also added racial equity and implicit bias training to correctional officer basic training, which started in January of 2022, which means that every employee eventually will get that within their first few weeks of hiring, because that will be part of the correctional officer basic training program, or it is effective a couple of months ago. We also have added implicit bias training through LMS, the learning management system, that's sent out to all of our staff on email to complete that training through LMS. They all get that. So that's I think I've probably received 15 to 20 of those myself to complete in the last year. So every staff will get that. And then we've also created through mental health, Dr. Piper has created a correctional crisis training that's going to be added to the annual in-service starting in 2023. That means that they will get the training initially in basic training, and then only certified staff go to basic training. So this will pick up and it'll cover a refresher for the certified staff every year, but it will also pick up for the non-certified staff that don't attend correctional officer basic training. So it'll be another training that will ensure that all of our employees are being touched in that area of training annually.
Okay, sounds great. And is it a timeline kind of when everybody fully will be CIT trained, not just those kind of coming in for basic training?
I can't say that we have an actual date because it's ongoing with the massive amount of turnover that we have. It would be hard to say that we ever will have everybody trained because we do have such a turnover and such a high rate there right now that this is going to have to be an ongoing project. We have to make sure we continue to put a focus on, and it's just impossible to say that on day X, everyone will be trained because of that turnover rate. But we are committed to ensuring that we continue the training, continue to add to the training, and making sure that we don't miss any sections of staff and that it's available to everyone.
Sounds great. And just one more short question. Is all the tablets, does any close custody facilities have any tablets introduced?
Yes.
At those facilities? Okay. Great.
They do. I don't want to misquote which ones they are, but Anson, Scotland, I actually can send you the exact list if you need it. I don't have that exact list right in front of me. I don't want to misquote which ones they are, but I know for a fact Anson and I know for a fact Scotland because I've been to both of those recently and seen them.
Okay, great. If you could send me that list, that'd be great. Thank you.
I will.
One more question, I think Representative Morey, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and Cynthia, I just wanted to follow up with one thing about these IDs being issued. DMV doesn't necessarily have to go to each facility to do it. Each facility does ID cards for all inmates. So when they get released, they need to do a similar quality. So it's not a piece of paper that's inadequate and not clear. So I just hope that can be improved right away for everyone that is coming out that doesn't face these obstacles.
I will meet with Director Cobb about that next week and see what she can look at for enhancements to that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, I really appreciate the entire committee report, and this discussion has been very helpful. I'm going to jump now to the Judicial Branch Committee. And Ellen, if you would just start us off with the Prosecutor Advisory Group.
I'm going to kick it back to Sam, I think, for an intro. Are you doing that? No,
no,
I
X'd him right out so we could finish. I'll make it up to him, I promise.
Okay, lovely. And I will make this quick. I think y'all have, for the most part, heard that we are doing this, but we have been hard at work for a while in developing this idea. It's very much based on the success that I think we've had in the Law Enforcement Advisory Group. And we had an initial meeting of this Prosecutor Advisory Group, I think maybe almost a month ago now. It's really just a group of district attorneys and sometimes members of their staff, if they are overburdened, to assist us in the implementation of our policy recommendations for prosecutors. Again, similar to the law enforcement group, it's not a requirement that you agree with every TREC recommendation, but that you agree with the spirit of what we're trying to do here and be open to conversation about implementation efforts. So we had a great first meeting, a lot of engagement, a lot of discussion amongst members of the group. And I wanted to flag that we have an upcoming meeting next week, Thursday at 11 a.m. The topic is going to be expunction efforts. I really would encourage task force members to come, even if you're not in the Judicial Committee. I think it's been so far very exciting to see this group come together, and I think it's going to be a really robust discussion every time. So I'm going to drop in the chat, or Greg can, the events page on the TREC website. That'll give you the link to the Zoom so that you can join next week. All future meetings will be located there, and we will continue to put up any materials that we get throughout the creation of each one of these sessions on that website. So very excited about this, and really do encourage all task force members to come to these meetings and be involved. I am now going to pitch it to Mercedes.
Thanks, Ellen. The Judicial Committee is super excited also to have been working with and grateful to the School of Government. Phil Dixon and Jamie Markham are working on pulling together some trainings for a variety of court actors. And so for our defenders, there's going to be available soon online for a low cost and CLE credit, some training on relief from monetary obligations. And this effectively is walking folks through all the changes that have happened in this arena. This DMV settlement that happened earlier this last month, that will provide notice to folks that licenses have been suspended, the updated rule that the Supreme Court passed, and also the updated 415 waiver form. That training is also going to be provided for judges at the District Court Judges Conference that's scheduled for this summer. And then also in May, a handful of districts, 9, 12, 13, 26, and 16B have been invited to participate. All those stakeholders there, judges, clerks, magistrates, the gamut are invited to attend there to see the role that they can play in reducing reliance on fines and fees. And I will shoot it over to, I believe, maybe Justice Earls.
Yes, thank you. So we are going to go to the local policy committee. I just want to say a word about the training. We are looking at whether, so we know that a lot of folks who are going to be trying to use this form will be unrepresented litigants. And so we're looking at, are there ways that we can adapt some of the training so that pro se folks can figure out how they might navigate the system to use the form. So any feedback or suggestions about that are definitely welcome. So that, yes, that does bring us to the local policy committee. Mike Hawkins.
Sure. Thank you, Justice Earls. And I will just be very brief and hand it over to Greg. On our slide, we put the members of our group on the slide because they have been working really hard. And I just want to mention them, Deborah and Helica, Chief Hawkins, Ronnie, Mitch, Director Smythe, and Gerda. They're all working in these areas that we're going to hear about here in a second. I'll mention, I don't know if Ronnie's still on the call or not, but a big part of what we're doing is awareness. We think that making the kind of grassroots awareness of what we're doing, what TREC is doing, is going to be key to so many things that TREC is trying to accomplish. And Ronnie has been just heroic in his leadership with the county commissioners in the state, and I wanted to mention that. But I'm going to hand it over to our staff members, Greg and Holly. And let me mention staff members that are working with us too, Greg and Holly. And I don't know that I mentioned Jasmine earlier when I talked, and that's crazy because Jasmine's really the cornerstone of everything that we're doing. But our staff has been just amazing in doing what we're doing. And with that, if we'll go to the next slide, we will talk about the law enforcement component of what we're doing. And Greg is going to take over with that. Greg?
Thanks, Mike. I'll give just a brief update on some of the work we've done on law enforcement in Committee 4. First, we just want to take a minute to publicly thank the more than a dozen members of the TREC Law Enforcement Advisory Committee, including all of the law enforcement members appointed to the task force from across the state. Since TREC's last full meeting in October, we've met 5 times with this group. You can see on the slide some of the topics we've discussed and the documents they've reviewed. And the group will continue to meet throughout the year. This group has been extremely helpful and productive to the work of the task force. They've provided insight and perspective on implementation of TREC recommendations within law enforcement agencies. When we brought these topics to them, they've suggested implementation strategies, have identified stakeholders and leaders in each of these areas, flag potential roadblocks, and help promote ideas to their colleagues. Also on the right-hand side of the screen, these are publications that the task force has put out there on our website at ncdoj.gov/TREC on the model policies page. Each of these benefited from in-depth review and discussion from the law enforcement advisory group. The meetings have been extremely helpful and productive, and they've really guided our outreach and our publications for law enforcement. So we can go to the next slide, and Holly, you'll take over.
Yes, we've heard about 2 important advisory committee so far, and I'm happy to also report that the Victim Survivor Advisory Group is off and running as well. This is in response to the recommendation 62. We have 9 members of that group, and we arrived at that group by first having a series of in-depth dialogues with NC CASA, the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Human Trafficking Commission, NC VAN, and several family justice centers. And so when in this group of 9, we've got survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking, and attempted homicide. The group did request a confidential forum to advise, and TREC staff is facilitating this. We plan on the topics of violence prevention, restorative justice, and Second Chance Act, definitely, and then we will be having other topics as they unfold. This group's also will be helpful in reviewing the information sheets that we are putting together. I just think this was a really important recommendation that the task force came up with, and glad to see it underway. Next slide, please. And as Mike mentioned, so much of our work has to do with awareness, and it's all about that ecosystem that was mentioned by Justice Earls earlier, and kind of building that and making it more robust in terms of engagement and knowledge. And so here are a few updates in that regard. We've spoken to 9 different Council of Governments, and which, just as a quick reminder, include elected representatives, local elected representatives from municipalities and counties. And we've also had the opportunity to present to their statewide group. As Mike mentioned, we've had an amazing relationship with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and I had it in my notes to make sure we cheered on Ronnie as well, because he's been fantastic. In those meetings, we've discussed reimagining 911 as well as diversion issues, and in 2 weeks, we'll be talking to the Public Safety Committee about violence prevention programs. One of the things that I've really enjoyed is meeting with all the reentry councils, and a huge shout out to Kerwin for being a huge presenter in this area. We've spoken to, I think, probably 7 different reentry councils, and we're on deck to present at their reentry conference as well. And finally, we know that philanthropy is a big, important partner in these recommendations coming to life, and we've been very intentional about exploring ways to engage North Carolina philanthropy and foundations in the work. So on the right hand side, you will see the model policies and information sheets that we've got up and running. We've got 3 published on the website: the Reimagining Emergency Response, the pre and post arrest diversion, and then coming soon to a website near you will be violence prevention and restorative justice. So I'll pitch it back to Mike.
And next slide, which is our last slide, and it is just an overview of our committee met and kind of established the priorities of what we need to do the remainder of this calendar year. I won't go over it. It's 11:34, Justice Earls. I'm sorry. I won't go over it, but these are the things that we are going to be working on in a lot of different ways over the next 8 months. And with that, we will hand it back to you, Justice Earls, unless there are any questions.
Thank you so much. Just for those of you who are worried about the time, I believe we have 2 or possibly 3 people for our public comment session. So we can turn to that very shortly, and we will finish before noon. So we'll just be a little bit over. But I did want to leave time. Thank you for this local committee report. Does anyone have questions or anything they want to ask of that committee? Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for that report and for the work. We had on the agenda that we would hear from the Data Study and Evaluation Committee, but in fact, we are going to, they have been working, but we're going to defer that to the start of our next meeting. But of course, happy to answer questions or take any comments about that if there's anything that anyone has. But if not, I think we're ready to start our public comment session. And our first person who has, or the first person who's here who signed up is Charlton Robertson. So I think we are promoting him to be a panelist, and then he can address us. Mr. Robertson.
Hello.
Hi, thank you. Welcome.
How's everyone? My name is Charlton Robertson, and I'm with the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. I'm the Eastern Regional Coordinator. I kind of support the teams in Wilmington, Robeson County, and Cumberland counties. I want to just say, I'm very pleased to see us pivot, as in the state from the old philosophy, the old ways of thinking, during the war on drugs era. Part of my work here is working with the Law Enforcement Assistant Diversion Program. And, I see that, a lot of the panelists beforehand, they presented, and, I'm glad we're moving to a humanistic approach to, law enforcement, and particularly, with substance abusers. We didn't see that in late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, but I'm glad to see that we're moving more in that direction. And particularly with the opioid crisis, and I would like to see more effort placed on other substance, drugs of substance abuse, like methamphetamine, crack cocaine, and some of the other drugs that are being used now.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for those observations. We appreciate it. And then our next, so we have a second person, Philip Cooper. Mr. Cooper, we can see you. If you unmute, then we'll hear from you.
Hey, peace and blessings. Thank you for all y'all that's taking time out of your day to address an issue such as this, and definitely salute those with lived experience who are taking time to be a part of the conversation. As my brother Kerwin had said, the long road to justice, and we definitely need people with lived experience at the table. So I do salute all of you that are doing just that. I wanted to just talk a little bit about forensic peer support specialists who can assist with the reentry planning, preferably pre-release. What I'm seeing and have seen over the years is how, the reentry plans can be impacted by the staffing issues. There are some folks that I have been in conversation with who are currently incarcerated, and I've heard that there are times when case managers might have to man the dorm, because of the staffing. And I totally understand. And us as peer support specialists on the outside, we can collaborate with those case managers to have a more seamless process for reentry. We are already doing it with some case managers who are reaching out, but I believe if we had the right people at the table, we could put our heads together and have something consistent across the board. It is an evidence-based practice. They are currently offering trainings in some community colleges, and they have even offered peer support training inside the prison. So I just wanted to raise this awareness and let you know, I know that people can panic whenever they see how these reentry plans are being impacted by the staffing issues, but have no fear, there is a solution. And all it requires is good, healthy communication between the case managers on the inside and the community-based organizations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I assume that we have your contact information and that we can be in touch with you for more information. So thank you very much for that. We did have 2 other people who signed up, but I'm understanding that they are not with us at this point. So, so that concludes our public hearing portion of the meeting. And at this point, I just want to allow an opportunity if anyone has anything else that they want to raise with us, any concerns or questions. Okay. Well, seeing none, what I want you all to know is that our next meeting is on July 15th at 10 a.m. And also, please mark your calendars for October 7th. That will be our next quarterly meeting. And I know that so much of the work and so much of your time and effort is going in to the committee work in between the meetings. And I just really want to express, I know on behalf of my co-chair, Attorney General Stein, but for both of us and for the governor who placed his faith in us when he appointed all of us to this task force. I just really want to thank you for your time, your efforts, bringing the best of your experience and knowledge and skills and talents to this effort. So with that, we will conclude only 12 minutes later than we were supposed to. And you will note that in true judicial fashion, I've been completely impartial as to who wins what basketball games might be played. But I do hope that all of you enjoy your weekends. And again, thank you so much for being with